Just a moment.
From the developers of Tomb Raider and Fighting Force, Swagman is a platforming adventure title about a couple of 8-year-old kids, Zack and Hannah, the only two people awake in a town under siege by a small army of night terrors led by the nightmare creature known as Swagman. Swagman captures the Dreamflies, creatures which usually neutralize his bad influence, and so everyone in town is stuck asleep in a series of never-ending nightmares. Or maybe they're just little nightmares, which just so happen to be occurring among the sleep. The idea is to make your way through the town and the nightmare world to free all the imprisoned Dreamflies and defeat the Swagman. And because I know someone out there is thinking it, this came out 2 years before 40 Winks. And because I know someone else out there is thinking it after seeing the name of this game, throughout the game you swap between controlling Zack and Hannah, often having to coordinate between them to solve puzzles or open up passages for each other. Both move and control the same in the real world and use a lot of the same items, though there is the occasional item that only one of them can use, like the yo-yo for Hannah. That can't be said for when either of them use a mirror to cross over to the terror trees. Wait, wouldn't territories make more sense and be a lot less awkward to say? Anyway, both kids turn into monster versions of themselves and gain unique abilities, like eye beams, or breathing fire, or a fancy-looking double jump. Both have their own inventories, though items can be swapped between them at any time, even if they're really far apart. Good thing too, because it's necessary to get through several parts of the game. They also share bugs, which were a part of Zack's collection until they escaped when all hell broke loose. These help for when you reach an area called Limbo, which shows up before a boss fight by showing the safe route to the Dreamfly in front of the boss door. Getting a lot of them reveals the path beyond that to an extra item or two. Visually, Swagman's in-game design is reminiscent of late 80s, early 90s TV shows and movies sharing the nightmare or make-believe monster premise. Stuff like Real Monsters, Little Monsters, or Bump in the Night. It strikes a decent balance where it's not really scary, but it's just out there enough with its world and the things populating it to make you dread moving through some areas more than you might otherwise. And in that regard, I enjoy it. As far as the cutscenes go though, if you had never seen a PlayStation 1 game in your life, you would probably see these and go, oh yeah, that's what a PlayStation 1 game looks like. The sound's quite nice too, particularly the soundtrack. It hits the right amount of creepiness and whimsy with each track, kind of like Medieval but with fewer outright orchestral scores and more piano and xylophones. Some sound effects didn't come out so well though, particularly anytime Hannah gets hit. Each area is filled with enemies and obstacles of varying types. While a few different flavors of the generic scallywag grunts are the most common, there are also unkillable ghosts and environmental obstacles like, say, hungry plants in the garden, or possessed pool cues in the house. Most enemies can be dealt with using a flashlight, which both kids have. The catch is, for a flashlight, its range is pitiful, which I guess means this flashlight is from a crappy Steam horror game. If you're not within arm's reach of an enemy, it won't hit them. Sometimes the animation of the swing also makes it hard to tell where it makes contact, so I often got hit by an enemy while trying to attack it. There are also cherry bombs, but those are in limited supply, and primarily used for certain boss fights and to blast open weak walls. The biggest obstacle though? Pits. For a game which focuses on platforming so much, it really didn't need to have this many instant death pits on nearly every stage. Sometimes it's not clear where you can or can't stand on them, and sometimes the game will just drop a jump input. I almost added, at the worst time, but with death pits that throw you back to the start of an area or even back a few rooms and wipe out your progress, any time is the worst time. There are parts of Swagman which try to offset this, like the Infinite Continues, which spawn you at the start of the last room you entered, or how while Zack and Hannah share a health bar, there are usually a decent amount of health drops nearby, or sleeping townspeople, which act like bottomless wells of health. This doesn't help when it comes to boss fights. I like the design of the game's bosses and the phase changes they go through, but given the limited abilities of Zack and Hannah, these tend to be major struggles even in the early going. Even when you know what to do, bosses in this game can deal enough damage to end the fight in sometimes 2 or 3 attacks. This sends you not to the start of the fight, but to Limbo, where you have to use the bugs to show the path all over again. Just setting a checkpoint that loads into the boss would have made dying far less time-consuming and far less annoying. What also would have helped? a clear save marker. There are chests scattered around where Scarab, the alpha male of Zack's bugs, pops out and gives some direction to the player. Sometimes though, he'll offer to save your game. There's no distinction between the chests where you can save and the ones where you can't, so it's a total crapshoot finding somewhere to save unless you backtrack to somewhere you know you can. While I like the audio and visual design of Swagman, parts of the gameplay really got under my skin. Namely when it came to the game not explaining things well, or at all, and inevitably leading to my death. Sometimes it was just mildly annoying having to figure some things out, and sometimes it outright pissed me off because I ended up losing a moderate amount of progress. I like and don't like Swagman, so I guess that means I can't give it a solid recommendation. Do check out the soundtrack though.
Say bump, 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 somebody bump. Everybody bump. Bump, bump, somebody, yeah. He goes 100 miles an hour, he's green dynamite. His name is Mr. Bump and he goes bumper than that. You can bump with the doll, bump with the bug. Bump on the ceiling or bump on the rug. And you can bump too from the east to the west. Just bump with the monster you love best. Say bump. Bump, bump, somebody, yeah. Everybody bump. Somebody, yeah. He goes 100 miles an hour, he's green dynamite. His name is Mr. Bump. Now remember, if you hear something going bump in the night, call a parent or someone you can trust, and let them get eaten by a burglar or monster or whatever it is, you know.